Yeah, go for it, Lyndsay.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their panels as much as I did. That was like really exciting and inspirational to listen to what's happening on the ground out there. We're going to move now into our national team athlete panel, which is really exciting. I'm really excited to introduce the next two women to you who we're going to have a little Q&A with. I've got some questions I'm going to ask them, but we're also going to open up the floor for anyone else to ask them questions as well. So today we have with us Emma Taylor and Anna Dunn-Suen, and I'm going to introduce them right now. Emma Taylor is a member of the Canadian Women's National 15s rugby team. She is currently on the journey to the 2022 World Cup in New Zealand. She also works full-time as an assistant project manager for Irving Shipbuilding in Dartmouth. She has a business degree from St. FX University, as well as a master's in project management from the UCD Smurfit Graduate Business School in Dublin, Ireland. She has been playing rugby for 14 years. She started in high school and since then has progressed to play for her province, her university, and her country. Very cool. And our second panelist today is Anna Dunn-Suen. Anna Dunn-Suen is a member of Team Canada Women's Beach Volleyball team for the past 3 years. She played 4 years of varsity volleyball at Dalhousie University in Halifax and competed for Nova Scotia at the Canada Games in 2013. She has earned a Bachelor of Science from Dalhousie University and continued her education while playing professionally, also completing a Master's of Science in Global Health at McMaster University, focusing on Inuit youth mental health and how sport organizations can better support their Inuit athletes. She is currently working for the Nunavik Volleyball Program, which is a nonprofit running volleyball program that empowers Nunavik youth, offers psychosocial support, and advocates for access and inclusion of Inuit athletes in sport at all levels. So welcome to Anna and Emma, and we're going to jump right in and start asking them some questions. What I'm going to do is just ask a question, and then you can you choose who answers first, and you can just come on at the same time if you like, and we'll have a little conversation. So my first question, can you tell us a little bit about your sport journey from start to finish, where you are now versus how you started?
Oh,
Unmute.
I was faster on the unmute. Yeah, so thank you, Lyndsay, for the introduction. But as she said, I kind of started my career playing youth sports in Nova Scotia, growing up in Halifax. I actually grew up in Spryfield, so always repping my my hometown. Yeah, so I after I finished playing at Dal, I really wasn't sure kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep playing, but I didn't know really what that looked like. And so I moved to Toronto, which has kind of a larger beach volleyball center, just like pretty much on a whim, just like, I'm just going to see what happens. And I decided that kind of summer that I was not going to come back to Nova Scotia, and I'd completed my degree, but I still had another year of eligibility to play in university. And I decided to not come back and play indoor and actually keep playing beach, keep pursuing beach. It was definitely kind of the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I love Halifax, I love Nova Scotia, my whole family's there. And so that was really challenging. And even just kind of making the decision for myself and not worrying about what everyone else was going to think about it and how ridiculous it was that I was switching sports at 22 or whatever. But yeah, hardest decision and still one that like I kind of feel to my core, but definitely the best decision I've ever made. And I can say that pretty confidently. I feel very fortunate because it was one of those, I felt like I was living in this, fortune favors the brave sort of moment where in my first year, I was selected to the national team, which is a huge accomplishment. And then I actually got to play my first international event in that first year as well, which is pretty rare. And that kind of really started that fire that this could really be something that I could pursue and continue. Yeah.
Okay, how about you, Emma?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Lyndsay.
My name is Emma. I'm actually from Pictou County. So if there's anyone from Pictou County on the line, represent. And I actually live in Sproutfield right now, Anna. So we have a connection there. It's great. Love it. So I grew up, as I said, in Pictou County. I played hockey, of course, ice hockey. I grew up playing youth sports there. When I was going to university, yay, Pictou County. Hi, Allie. When I was going to university, I actually was contemplating pretty much up until the last minute. I think it was post high school graduation that I actually decided I was going to pursue rugby instead. So I was going to play hockey. I was meant to go to York University, but instead I went and played rugby at St. Max. So big change. Also, I remember, I always tell people the story just because it's kind of funny, but like I was offered a pretty substantial scholarship at York, and at St. Max, I wasn't offered anything. And my parents were like, my dad was like, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want to do? He's like, I want you to be happy, but are you sure? I was like, yes. Yeah, so I did 5 years at St. Max. I also played basketball at St. Max. I trained with them in my fourth year, and I played in my last year, just to mix it up. Yeah, so I'm similar to Anna in that I did leave Nova Scotia for a bit. So I've been I worked here. So after I graduated from St. Max, I got my first cap with the national team. So they were gearing up. They're about a year out from the next World Cup. So I was kind of young, a bit, I don't know if I was in a bit over my head, because I didn't have like much experience playing at that level. But I was kind of in and out of the program for a couple of years. And then after staying in Halifax, I decided that I wanted to go overseas for a bit. So I actually ended up moving over to Ireland. Really random story, won't tell it, but just also kind of out of nowhere. It was a really quick turnaround. I think I kind of made the decision and was gone within a month. So yeah, I spent 3 years there. The first 2 years I was working and just playing rugby in the All Ireland League. And in my last year, I think I was actually studying for the LSAT, and I wrote the LSAT, and I was pretty hard set on going to Dow Law. And then I know, like, subconsciously, I just wanted to go back to Ireland. So I applied for a master's program there in project management, and then I got in. So I was like, I'm going back. So I went back there, played rugby. I came back to Halifax after the 3 years. Most heartbreaking plane ride of my life. But yeah, I started working for Irving Shipbuilding in Dartmouth. So I'm not at the actual shipyard. I'm working on the new combatant ships for the Canadian Navy. So we're working on the design in Dartmouth. So that's a pretty neat project. Yeah, and then last year I actually went over to the UK in the middle of the pandemic. So that was great, and played in the Premier 15s rugby league there. So I just returned there last June. So I've just been settling in. Our national team program has started up again. So we were just away this last November. So we had 2 games down in Denver, a game in the UK against England and a game against Wales. So and here I am. So I'm just, wow. Yeah.
That's awesome. So that's my next question was going to be about the last 2 years and how COVID has affected your training and your travel. Has it really interrupted your plans, or where are you with that right now? Anna, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, so for beach volleyball, it's kind of a crazy lifestyle. You completely choose your own competition schedule. So in the past, I've kind of, single year you're in Nicaragua, then jumping over to Europe, to Southeast Asia, and kind of depending on your own schedule. So that was a really big shift in just lifestyle, especially that kind of first year of COVID, where it was like pretty much like a hard no, like you're just not going anywhere. So yeah, that was a really big lifestyle change, but it was also kind of a nice opportunity because I live right now, I live in like the beaches area in Toronto, which is right by where we train. And so in the summer, my boyfriend and I, we would like go down in the mornings, train, you know, come back, have our coffees. Like we just had this like really nice training opportunity, but also just like very relaxed and able to just kind of catch up on like other life things. And then this past summer, I was able to go, I competed internationally again for the first time in like 2 years. So that was in Hungary and Czech Republic. And that was, it was so emotional. I first came back, I was just like, I got out there and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Like, this is so great. And it was just so nice to feel that competitive fire again and kind of know that that was still there.
Yeah, great. How about you, Emma? How has COVID impacted your schedule?
Very similarly. Even just this last November, Anna, when you were saying that, I remember it was our first, we played the USA. So it was our first game back as a team. We hadn't played together actually since November 2019. So it had been pretty much 2 years. And when we won, it was like this weird like feeling of relief. Like it was just like, okay, we're back. Like, you know, it was such a rough game. Like it was not our best show whatsoever, but we won. And it was just nice. Like everyone was so excited to be back together. But like I said, it was just like, you know, a nice feeling that we're starting to move forward. Back in 2020, when like COVID first kind of took over, I remember we were supposed to have a camp in the May of 2020. And we were also supposed to go on tour August of 2020. And I remember all of us were just like, you know, whatever, May camp will be canceled, but we'll be, you know, back in action in August. Like things will be sorted out by then. And, you know, you get to August and we're like, all right, this is going to be a while. So that was definitely really tough. And when I made the decision to go overseas, I went over right after Christmas, actually last year. I remember like, I think everyone was really confused. So for anyone who's on the call and understands the state that the UK was in, kind of the end of 2020, like in terms of COVID, we're looking at 60,000 cases a day over there. So everyone was like, are you sure? Like, this is kind of crazy. But, and I remember when we actually got over there and we had to isolate anyways. I went over with 2 girls on my national team actually. But what the 2 of us were isolated together. And I remember 3 days into isolation, a couple of the games started to get postponed because of COVID. And I remember just like, oh my God, if I just moved over here and took a leave from work and everything, and we don't even get to play games. So that was very stressful to say the least, but we're back up and running now. So yeah, it was nice to get some rugby in despite everything. And sometimes I felt kind of guilty almost that I was like, how come I get to play and some people can't even leave their house? But it's just it was just the way obviously the UK kind of dealt with you know, with COVID, and they thought it was really important for sport to go ahead. So I'm grateful for that. But yeah.
So outside of COVID, what are some major obstacles that you've experienced during your journey? And is there anything significant that you can remember from your career that's been a setback or a major obstacle you've had to overcome?
Getting cut a couple times, probably up there.
You want to tell us about that? How'd that feel?
Yeah. Not great. So after kind of my starstruck first year, I was actually cut that following winter. I was welcomed back on the team and it was this whole thing. But initially I was so heartbroken, confused. I feel like I'd done all of the right things. I had kind of gotten some international results. I was getting better. And I was just so confused as to how it could be that I was doing checking all the boxes, doing all the right things, and it still wasn't happening. And that is just the nature of sport. And there was kind of politics involved as well, in terms of like they had we were kind of like narrowing out for the like pre-Olympics for 2020. So it kind of made sense, but my timing was just not quite there. But I think the following year, I was also, so I'd come back, made the team again. They asked me to come back, and then they cut me the following year. That time was an interesting one because it was, I feel like I've always defaulted to how other people have valued me and assigned a lot of my value to how other people have valued me. So especially for coaches, it's like, oh, well, if the coach thinks I'm not good, then I'm not good. But I think that opportunity really gave me license to really choose to continue to play. And so I felt very empowered by that. And instead of just questioning why it had happened, it was more like, I just think they're wrong.
Did it motivate you?
I just don't agree. I just don't agree with you guys. Like, I just don't agree with your decision. And so it was definitely motivating, but the kind of nice thing about being an independent athlete was that I got to kind of choose my everything. So I had the freedom to choose my training schedule, to work out with who I wanted to, and surround myself with people that were going to support me in my journey. And anything that was kind of stressful, like that was stressful in and of itself, is all that coordination, but I got to really like build it for myself, which I really valued. And when they called me back to be back on the national team, it was I was very thankful for that opportunity to kind of have that agency over my journey, and to kind of then be able to incorporate everything that I'd learned as an independent athlete then to be kind of part of the system.
Sounds like a very humbling experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Emma, so same question for you. Outside of COVID and the obvious, have there been any major obstacles that you can think of in your career that you've had to overcome?
Yes, I would say a similar, I have had a similar experience to Anna. I did have a bit of a gap in my Rugby Canada career with like selection. So you definitely hit home with that, pulled on a bit of heartstring. I'd say also just the commonality of like the financial side of things. So that's always been a huge obstacle. It wasn't until I think it was April of 2016, so not that long ago, where we had our first camp that we didn't have to pay to attend. So it used to be a pay-to-play model. I remember having to pay $2,500 to go to England the year before for 10 days. So combined with the opportunity cost of taking that time off of work, it's not easy. So that's always been tough. It still continues to be hard. Like this year, it's like a running joke that I'm going to be in the office for like 3 days. So just with all the stuff that we have coming up, we have a tournament for a month between May and June in New Zealand. And then, we're actually away for World Cup for almost 2.5 months, pending selection. Everyone, knock on wood for me. But anyways, and Janice just put a note in there that like the men's side has never had to deal with such things. And I have a feeling we're going to touch on some kind of
we're going to get there.
Of that topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll save that maybe for the next question, but that's definitely been a tough one for me, and just kind of in the same, I guess, family of obstacles is just, I'm a pretty career driven person. I have done the, play rugby overseas, and when I was in Ireland and playing, I was working for the 2 years and doing my master's at the same time. So I wasn't professional. I wasn't getting paid to play there. I was just playing. But last year, I did have a taste of the professional athlete side, which anyone who knew my experience over there, like, it was just not my cup of tea. Like, I don't love waking up and just being like, what do we do today? You know, like, wait around for training and then go to training. Like, for me, I need to be busy. I need to be doing other things. So because, rugby in Canada, unless you're playing seven, so the 15s program, like, it's not professional. I'm not carded, so I don't get paid to be a national team athlete. That, I have had a job and it has kind of pushed me in that direction. So I love my job, and that's something that I'm not, I won't say not willing, because I would give up a lot of things for a national team, because I love that team, but it's definitely something that I would really be pushed to sacrifice. And I think that, if the funding was there, and if I grew up in a bit of a different, Rugby Canada culture where financially I was always supported and I wasn't always leaning on my career, that, like, I always think of where I am now. Like, imagine if, I had some of the financial support, like, when I was a bit younger and developing, and imagine if, the player that I could be in, the player that some of my teammates could be and stuff. So yeah, those obstacles have always been there, but
yeah. So I love that you're talking about your career right now, and I'm going to ask this question to Anna first. How does your career impact your professional career, impact your sports career, and how do you balance the two? And is that difficult? Is that easy? And what keeps you motivated to stay in sport when, you're an adult now, career is, a part of your life? How do you balance the two?
So I'll definitely echo what Emma was saying, and kind of that financial piece of being, I think, regardless of pretty much whatever sport you're in as a female athlete, and often male athletes as well, but as you're trying to be a professional, you're not necessarily treated as such. You're usually not making enough money to live and support your training costs and support your travel costs for competition. So that's definitely a challenge, even if you are kind of like carded, like, oh, it's so great, and it is like it is a really amazing support. But when you look at the kind of grand scheme of your life, it's not very much, and it's not enough if you're definitely trying to kind of compete all around the world. For me, I think I was really fortunate, and again, similar to Emma, I always really valued my life and my kind of personal development outside of sport alongside with my development in sport. So I was a varsity athlete, so was kind of in school and competing. And then after I kind of switched to beach volleyball, I worked through my master's as I was still competing. And I think for me, that's always given me a good sense of balance, even though it's been sometimes a lot to manage. It's also been really helpful for me to have that kind of other outlet to kind of remind myself, especially when sports can get sometimes a little bit overwhelming. You get self-doubt, you get all these other feelings, that you have other avenues of your life that are bringing you joy and accomplishment and all that kind of thing. So I think for me, it was really healthy. But I think I, again, was very fortunate to be able to kind of combine my loves into what I ended up studying. So, sport, health, and service kind of all meld together and into my job that I'm working with Inuit athletes right now, and the kind of mental health sector. So, but yeah, there's definitely choices that you have to kind of make. I don't like to think about it as sacrifices, because I like to kind of remind myself that I choose to do this every day. And if I choose not to, there's nothing holding me back from moving on and doing other things and progressing in other ways. So yeah.
Emma, is there anything you wanted to add to the conversation about career? You kind of touched on it already, but how do you find that balancing act?
Yeah, I think literally echoing everything that Anna said, I find it really tough some days, and some days are a lot harder than others. Waking up every morning at 20 after 5 and training before work, working 9 hours a day, usually some sort of training after work. I've also just recently started a pop-up thrift store that a lot of proceeds are going to be going to charity. Why I started that, someone may have to remind me later on when I'm like a bundle of stress, but I do like to remind myself one of the biggest, I guess, components of me getting this far was community support. So I always try to remind myself that it's really important to give back and do what you can. But yeah, like my work has been pretty cool about me taking very, very large amounts of time off. So I am thankful for that. Obviously, I like to caveat with it's unpaid. But yeah, it is handy that, I leave and I just come back to my role, and yeah, they're really, I am really supported there. So I will say I'm thankful for that, but it's really tough. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's great to hear that your employer is supportive. I think that's a big challenge too, for a lot of people. I want to talk about, you touched earlier about, let's compare and contrast a little bit between the women's side of sports and the men's side of sports. So I'm going to ask you both specifically with your own sports, have you noticed any, have you been treated differently? Has your team been treated differently than your male counterparts? What's been your experience with the equivalent of what you do to what a male in your position would be given or allowed? Anna, why don't you go first? Or Emma, you unmute it first. You go first.
No, I'll just go first, and then hopefully I won't completely go off. Just kidding. Yeah, so being like a female rugby player in Canada is definitely tough when you're comparing yourself to the men. And I remember it was when the men went to the World Cup, the girls were saying that their budget for their blazers that they all got to wear in their World Cup send-off was, greater than our entire budget for the year. So that's always tough to hear those things. One thing that I've just kind of recently epitomized, I guess, is everywhere that I've gone to play rugby, the men have always received greater resources and better coaches and more ideal training schedules and turf times and just kind of everything that you can imagine in between. I remember one of my coaches had told us, he told us not to compare ourselves to the men's team and what they get, and to control our controllables, because their finances and the fact that they bring in more ticket sales, and they're more heavily marketed and they get a lot of money for that, and that that's not something that we can control, and that it's really important to connect as a team instead of focusing on kind of the men's side. But one thing that I kind of hate myself for, but not actually, because I've grown from it for sure, is that I took that mentality and said, okay, don't compare yourself to the men. And when I was playing over in Ireland, a lot of the Irish women were fighting with the IRFU, trying to make sure there is more equality between the men's program and the women's program. Rugby in Ireland is huge. The men's team has been extremely successful, so that was a huge battle for them. And I remember the way my brain processed it was because I lived with a couple of the girls that played for the Irish team, and I remember being mad at them because I was like, you guys don't know how lucky you get it. You guys think this is bad. They got to go into camps every second weekend as a team, which we don't get to do in Canada, mainly because of the size of our country, and it'd be way too expensive to bring us all together all the time. They'd be upset that they'd have camps at like kind of a dodgy hotel, like they'd be staying in a dodgy hotel, or their food would be weird. And I was like, we get put up in residence half the time, and same with when I played over in England last year, the girls would complain about stuff and they have it, like in my mind, they had it so good, and I was always comparing myself to them and I was like mad at them. But then like, I thought about it, I'm like, I don't like that mentality. Like, I get like some people think that it's not a controllable, but like, I don't want to be mad at other women's programs and other women's teams for fighting like a battle to try to, get equality between their two programs. Like, I should be mad at our men's program and whoever's funding our men's program. Like, I don't care if it's like not a controllable. So like, I tried to like kind of change my mindset. Like, no, I'm not going to let that kind of affect while I'm playing and while I'm training. At the end of the day, like I'm focusing on a goal of winning a World Cup. But like the way I kind of look at it, it's like, if I'm not going to be mad about it, if my teammates aren't going to be mad about it, like who will be? And I will note that, of course, the coach that did try to push that mindset was a male coach, and also like supported by other male coaching staff. So, that's kind of how I feel about it at the moment. And like, it's also, I hate to say this, but it sucks that like our women's program, my team, we're ranked number 3 in the world right now. And we are in a very good spot to actually win a World Cup. Our men's team is very, very poor. So without like trying to put icing on it, like they're very bad. And it sucks that, that's, and sometimes people associate like how their program is doing with ours. So I also don't like that. But yeah, so there's definitely challenges there. I think like trying to shift my mindset and other people's mindsets just to like not be comfortable with how much inequality there is, especially like the pay gap and the resource gap. If you ask me like the follow-up of like how you change that and how we go about making it more equal and fair, I don't know. Like, so
Emma, have you seen throughout your career, have you seen any improvement towards equity? Have you seen the needle shifting?
Well, just the like the elimination of the pay to play model, but I also like will caveat that by saying that was only the case because we had the Monty Heald Fund, which is basically started by an anonymous donor who made a very substantial contribution that he said, I only want this to go to our women's program. It's actually my girlfriend who plays on the national team with me, her mother, who was the first ever captain of the Canadian women's team. So Steph White, she's she is the chair of the Monty Heald Fund, and she keeps it going. And we do get some very, very hefty donations. So it makes you realize like people want us to succeed and people want us to push on. But like, it wasn't Rugby Canada that, bridged that gap. It was literally an anonymous donor. So it's sad, but I mean, we're getting there, I guess.
There's still lots to be done. So Anna, same question. You're in a very different sport, very different world, but what can you compare and contrast a little bit for us what the female side and the male side look like?
Yeah, just kind of to say, kind of add on to what Emma was getting at, I think it's so easy as female athletes to get caught in that trap of comparison and then also competing with each other. So even between sports where you say like, oh, well, this female sport shouldn't, like, for example, like let's say like Hockey Canada for women, like might have more funding than some other sports, but us comparing them for each other is not helpful. And it's so easy again to get kind of stuck in that loop, just based on like the world we grew up in, like, oh, that's just like how things are. It's just inequality is just like the way things are, like, oh, we're just gonna have to deal with it. We're gonna have to control our controllables. So yeah, I definitely kind of resonate with that. I think for beach volleyball, yes, definitely a totally different world, but I think a good thing for beach, we're one of the few sports, our international federation, we're paid out actually equal to men, which is definitely a rarity. And I think a little bit owing to the youth of our sport, in that we're not a particularly, I think the first time beach volleyball was in the Olympics was in 1992. And so don't necessarily have maybe those like ingrained roots of kind of male domination of the sport. And so we might have a little bit of a leg up in that regard. But I think something for me, and this is maybe kind of a bit of an aside, is for beach volleyball, we often get asked about the uniforms as like a female athlete compared to as a male athlete. I don't think men are being asked why they're wearing shorts or, cut off shirts or no shirts sometimes. But for me, I think outside of, a woman's choice to kind of do what they want with their bodies, the dialogue's very frustrating because it kind of sidelines the athleticism, the skill in our sport. And it kind of draws attention to this idea of society's expectation of female athletes as being simultaneously, sexy, but also modest. I have to be this and that at the same time. And
perform well at the same time.
And perform well. And I can't, I have to be, shamed for being kind of proud of my body and that kind of thing. So I think that's definitely a challenge for our sport, and kind of trying to deviate from that. What do you do? Like, do you like completely cover up, or do you not cover up? Because it's all an individual choice, I guess.
That's right. And the media comes into play a little bit here with your sport in particular, Anna, because the uniforms are very different, and the media has picked up on that. And it is a topic that comes up over and over again. And it does detract a little bit from the athleticism and the performance side of things, I think. But hopefully that will change over the years. Have you seen shifts in your sport? You touched on a point that was very interesting that I had never thought of, was that your sport is relatively new, so to speak, whereas rugby would be considered an much older sport. And so you're coming from a place of I guess almost youth. And but in your career, have you seen anything shift significantly for the better for the female participants in your sport?
I think we're getting stronger advocates, and athletes are kind of finding their voice. And I think beach really cultivates a lot of, in Canada also, we have a lot of really amazing, strong role models that are trying to kind of make changes on the international scene for athletes, and just for athletes in Canada. But I think in terms of like systemic changes, unfortunately not so much. I think this is in part due to kind of inclusion, and again, maybe this is the age of our sport. Inclusion's not necessarily about kind of welcoming other people in, because you're welcoming people into a system that was not necessarily built for you. And so I think for me, this is the most challenging part about systemic change, is it's about creating like space, like new spaces and new like avenues for women in leadership and in sport that are created by women for women.
Yeah. So in saying that, what is the sort of the youth side of your sport look like right now, Anna? Like what is beach volleyball doing to welcome new athletes or young athletes? What programming is out there for girls in your sport?
I think there's beach volleyball is very, very popular in Ontario, it's the fastest growing sport. It's the fastest growing NCAA sport in the States, which is pretty cool. But I think obviously our proximity to the States, that's definitely influencing it, where there's more opportunities for females to get scholarships through beach volleyball, and more opportunities for them to continue playing and develop. And I think it's actually interesting. I think our development system actually really leans heavily on athletes going to the NCAA and getting those playing opportunities, and then coming back and reintegrating into the national team system. But again, like you see, it's always like kind of a give and take, where on the male side, they don't have NCAA, or they don't have beach volleyball. And so we then have these male athletes that are, not necessarily even going to university at all, because they want to keep pursuing beach volleyball, not volleyball. And they kind of finish their careers without a degree or anything. So, but on the female side, on the youth side, I think it's a really positive shift. And I think more and more women are seeing opportunities in beach volleyball, whereas previously it was just like volleyball, indoor volleyball, and if you weren't this kind of player, then you couldn't do it. Whereas there's maybe a little bit more flexibility in beach volleyball in terms of, even body type, style of play, because there's a lot of creativity in it. There's a lot of different kinds of styles of players, which I think is a positive image for girls and women growing up.
Yeah, I agree. And Emma, I'll toss that same question over to you about what does rugby look like for girls right now, younger girls? How do they get into it? What's their path?
We've been awesome in Nova Scotia, especially for having a lot of minis programs. So pretty much all of the clubs around the province have like youth or mini groups, I guess. I used to coach when I played for HRFC. Mind you, there was like an under 5 category, and most of the time it's just parents dropping them off for an hour and being like, thank you. And they usually just like play tag. It's not actual rugby, but no, it's awesome. So that's been going for quite a while. So on top of that, they also have, when I first started playing provincial rugby, back in, I want to say like 2010-ish, maybe 2009, showing my age, but back then, the youngest group that we had, I think, was like under 17. So now they do have some, Janice is on the line. I think we had like U15 for men and women. One of the coolest things that I also see every morning is that we do have a Ignite and Academy program. So it's for mostly high school age people. I think like grade 10, 11, and 12. I think grade 10 is their youngest. But the Ignite group is like our high performance. So I think there's 8 of them in our current Ignite group. So they train at the Canadian Sports Centre with myself and Olivia DeMerchant, so another national team athlete, actually the captain of our national rugby team. So and we just recently noticed, so I'm there every morning, and they're there 4 days a week, and it's awesome because our current strength and conditioning coach, Shannon McCauley, she's actually an ex national hockey team player, so she's our S&C, and it's usually our rugby group is the first ones there in the morning, but then hockey comes in after us. Usually I'm there like a bit of an overlap because my training takes a bit longer, but hockey is there and soccer is there, and it's all women. So usually for the first couple hours of every day during the week, it's all women in there. And I think that's really cool. It's like starting your day off at 6 a.m. kind of sucks sometimes, especially in the winter. It's really cold, warming up your car. And it's like nice just to go in there and see, like some boss women waking up early, getting strong and fit and doing things that they have to do to be the best they can be for their sport. But it's just cool to surround yourself with people like that. And I love being in there with the kids. Sometimes if I haven't had my full coffee yet, I can be a bit grumpy. So I always try to like remind myself, like, I always like chat with them and whatever. But yeah, it's really cool. Even just like, I love asking them, even if I don't need a spot on the bench press, just be like, hey, like such and such, will you come over and spot me? And they're like, yeah, like, thanks. Like, like I just love doing stuff like that. Like, I know it sounds stupid, but just like engaging with them. So that program is really cool. And I actually didn't grow up with that. So I think it's awesome to see. And like, even like I said, Janice is on the call, but like kind of our drivers right now, Rugby Nova Scotia, are all women. So like Janice, Emma Delory, Remy Myers, who's taken over because Jack and Rowdy's gone out west to coach the sevens program. So like literally it's women keeping us afloat, our men and women's programs. We do obviously have some male coaches in there. But yeah, so it's really cool to see.
That's great to hear. Anna, what's next for you? Where is your beach volleyball career heading? Where do you see yourself in the next few years?
Yeah, I actually, in the last kind of couple months, I've actually kind of started to transition out of sports. I'm kind of in the process of retiring right now. I don't exactly know what the future holds for me right now, but it's so funny. I took like a month off of just like, okay, I'm gonna like feel it out, see where I'm going, what I'm feeling. And I have that like itch of just like, you get so ingrained with these habits of waking up, training. I eat the same way that I did when I was an athlete. I'm essentially training the same way, obviously just from home kind of thing, but and I'm not on the sand, but so I'm definitely struggling to kind of find what that, and I've learned there's a word for it, which is called detraining, which I didn't even know was really a thing. So I'm kind of working on that side in terms of the athletic side and figuring out, what I want to do now that I can do anything sport-wise.
Yeah.
And then I'm working still for Nunavut Volleyball. And that's something that's really like taken over. And I think it was kind of happening as I was an athlete. You kind of start to realize how impactful you can be as a coach, as a role model, and just how cool that is that you get to kind of be able to share that. So that's what I've really enjoyed about being a coach recently. And for the athletes that I coach in the North, like it's just such an amazing connection and such an amazing project that I get to work on. So that's definitely somewhere that I want to be. I was actually in the North right before the pandemic started in February of 2020, and I haven't been able to go back since then. So I'm hoping to be up there sooner rather than later. And so that's kind of those pieces, and looking to go back to school because I just didn't get enough the first 2
That's amazing. That's amazing. Emma, how about you? What's your future look like after the World Cup?
Oh, your guess is as good as mine. I'm at that like kind of strange age. So I'm gonna be 30 this summer. Pray for me. So I'm gonna be 30 this summer. I'll be 30 at the World Cup. And because the World Cup was delayed, the next one's in 3 years. So I think I need to make that decision is whether I'm going to try to do another cycle. Yeah. Kind of like back to like almost the kind of obstacles and balance thing. But I've also found like just some other areas of my life have like taken a back seat like over the last little while. So I think post World Cup, like I said, like I'm in a relationship, and obviously both of us being national team athletes, a lot revolves around literally like we base our, when we get to see each other, it's a distance relationship as well as, it revolves around rugby. So I definitely want to like not just like my actual relationship, but also some friendships and stuff, things that I've had to put aside. And I recently have I have a nephew, so it's the first baby in our family since me, believe it or not. So, I'd like to spend a bit of time with him. I also, something I guess that a male athlete wouldn't have to worry about, but is if I possibly want to have kids or something in that 3-year span as well. But yeah, I think definitely taking kind of the first half for maybe all of 2023 to kind of get back into the swing of just being a normal person, a non-national team athlete. And then I think kind of the last 2 years, if I still feel that my role is there and that I'm feeling fit and my knees don't hate me and kind of all of that, I think I'll probably try to do another cycle, and that might involve going overseas or something again for a bit of a spurt, but stay tuned. I don't know.
Amazing, both of you. Like the legacy that you're creating for your sports is really incredible, really inspiring. What I'm going to do now is open up the floor to any of the participants. You can use the raise your hand little emoji, or you can leave a question in the chat and we'll try to get to all of them. So if anyone has questions for Emma or Anna, please go ahead and ask them now.
Em, you can unmute yourself and ask your question if you'd like.
Oh, I was just wanted to say thank you to both participants. And I think it's incredible to hear you talk about your personal journeys of how to create and define who you are and what you would like to pursue and how that goes. And I want to thank you both for sharing that.
We've got, maybe there's a question embedded here from Liesl. So as an American Canadian, she thinks about Title 15, 1972, which prohibited any sex-based discrimination in sports at the educational institutions that received funding from the federal government. This saw slowly but surely huge development in women's sports like basketball, volleyball, soccer. She wants to know where Rugby Canada gets its funding. Is there equal funding for development? And Emma, she says that it sounds that your story is similar to kind of the US women's national team in soccer, which kind of helped fuel the fight for equal pay. Hopefully that this will spread to Canada and look at women's soccer and hockey success in Canada. But to answer your question, Liesl, a lot of the funding for our national sporting organizations comes from Sport Canada. And there is some equality in what sports are offered where and how, but a lot of the funding decisions, once the funding does go to the national sporting organizations and our provincial sporting organizations as well, that's determined by their board and their staff as to how that money gets allocated. So I don't know, Emma or Anna, if you have anything that you wanted to add there to Liesl's comment or to share, but I'll open it. No, cool. Go ahead, Emma first and then Anna.
Oh, no, I was literally just going to say, I was thankful that you took upon yourself to answering that from the rugby side of things. So nothing to add.
I was just going to kind of toss in, I think I spoke a little bit about the NCAA when Lyndsay asked about it kind of earlier, but I think there's also lots of programs that are happening in Canada that are supporting our youth athletes and supporting that development pathway, not just the fact that we're kind of completely, like, I don't want to be misunderstood that it's kind of completely to do with the NCAA and Title IX. Obviously that's great for women, but for example, this past summer, myself and Volleyball Canada and Volleyball Nova Scotia, we kind of coordinated a development camp for youth athletes in Nova Scotia. And it was the first time that Volleyball Canada has done anything like that. And I really kind of pushed for it because I'm from Nova Scotia and I think it's really important, but those opportunities weren't necessarily there when I was a younger athlete. So I think creating those opportunities and creating that connection and having athletes see like, yo, like you can do this, like this is a possibility. You kind of just see what that pathway is, and how you can get there. Kind of classic, you can't be what you can't see, and creating more opportunities for myself as an athlete to be visible, but even just all female athletes, and specifically Nova Scotian athletes to be visible and to share their successes.
Yeah, thanks. Megan Conroy.
Hello, everyone. Just a question for both athletes. What would be like one or two things that you think you will carry over from your experience as national team athletes into being involved with youth, or like what would be kind of a key takeaway as you look to like the next generation of athletes coming through, especially females, either piece of advice or lesson learned, or something that you would like to share with those athletes coming up in the future?
That's a really good question. I think that I kind of frame it in like a similar way. I've thought about this because a couple of people have asked me this before, kind of like what I would almost say to like, 15, 16-year-old Emma or whatever. I think that probably the most important thing for me has been, to find something that motivates you. And for me, it's okay if it's like yourself, and it's okay if it's, you really want to do this for you. I think so many times we try to find like external motivations. Like I will say my family is like, I'm really close with my family and the support that they've provided me. And I do everything I can for like Rugby Nova Scotia, because they're probably the main reason why I got here. But like, unless you literally like have a fire inside of you to push yourself, and until you say like, kind of say to yourself, like, this is something that I want to do for me. This is something like, you're the only one who can actually physically do it, right? So like everyone, like, I don't know if that makes it sound like kind of selfish, but at the end of the day, like, you're the one who has to do the work. And like, I wish kind of sometimes when I was younger, like I almost wish I just like went out and did it. Like I just pushed myself and just said, you're going to do this for you. And like when I was younger, like even post St. X, we didn't quite have as many like development. And I know when I was actually listening in the breakout room, I think it was Chelsea who was talking about like, it's that awkward kind of stage between like university and like that next level. So I think like, obviously not youth, but I think like something else I would really push to like, that kind of age group, that early 20s, like post U Sport, post NCAA, whatever it is like, if you want to make it happen, if you want to make it to the national team, or maybe it's not the national team, maybe you want to play for the provincial team, is to keep at it. And that like there are programs in place now to like bridge that gap. Like I said, when I was that age, I had to do it for me. Like I really had to grind myself. Like I said, there's people obviously helping me along the way, but I was really alone like in it. So I think like just to make sure that people know like it can be done. And like I say this to so many of my friends and like girls I grew up with, I'm like, you don't have to retire at 22. There are programs and things you can do there, do out there. And kind of like I don't know if Chelsea's still on the line, but something that she said that I really liked is like, I think maybe finding a place like mentally where, post graduation, or even maybe it's post high school, like maybe you don't want to play at university, is like, you can still do things for fun. Everything doesn't have to be like national team competitive level, like I'm going to be the best in the world mentality. Like sometimes like one of my favorite things to do is literally go get a basketball and like shoot around and like play pig, you know, like things like that. So it's just find something like fun and do it, and just know that like the world isn't over when you graduate university or high school and stuff. Like, I think that's so important. And I think that will also help with like the kind of drop off of women in sport, like at that age. So sorry, long-winded answer, but
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. Anna, anything you want to add?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with Emma, and it's so funny, this like kind of wonky age group of like post university where there's like definitely people that want to keep playing or don't necessarily know how to keep going or what those next steps are. I think what is for me when I'm working with younger athletes, it's so interesting because I can empathize with them, because I was 100% there when like you were 16 years old and you lost a game and it was like the most heartbreaking thing in your entire world and you thought you were going to completely crumble. But then looking at it now, you're like, you're fine. Like everything's going to be fine. But I think for me, when I was growing up, and something I've reflected on a lot recently is I would kind of maybe try and like hide myself away a little bit, because I felt like me like saying that I had these big dreams, saying that I wanted to play for the national team, that I wanted to be a professional athlete. That's like what people who like have dreams say, but like that's not like people who actually like do those things. And so I didn't want to be an outsider because I had these like lofty goals. And, you know, if I had a bad game and everyone knew that I wanted to be a professional athlete, then that like would weigh on me even more. And so I think if I could, talk to little Anna and just say like, there's going to come a time when you will find peers who aren't intimidated by your drive or your dreams or your ambition. And they're going to love that part of you. They're going to love like that unique part of you, and to kind of not feel like I need to kind of be small in order to kind of fit and not make other people uncomfortable. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Lyndsay, I'm going to put that question to you too. And Emma and Anna, I think, just stole our thunder by asking what we would offer to, you know, the younger versions of themselves. But what would you share with a younger version of your athletic self or yourself in general? No, you're still muted.
There. It's an interesting question for me because I was all over the place as a kid. I had a lot of interests and I had my hand in a lot of things. I wasn't exceptional at anything. I was good at a lot of things. So I didn't have a clear path that I wanted to follow. I always knew that I was an artist at heart, but I grew up in the 80s. And that wasn't really a proper career path for someone my age. You know, anyone who's in their 40s now can probably nod along and go, yeah. But the other interesting thing too is when I was creating my project, my book, I kept thinking to my why, because every time I would interview someone for my book, I just asked them why. Like, as an adult, you don't need to be here. Nobody's making you be here. This is your choice. It's coming out of your own pocket, your own time. Why are you still doing what you're doing? And there's some truth to this saying that, you know, be who you need it to be when you were younger. And I think back to myself as a 13, 14-year-old girl, and that was a really hard time for me. And I was involved in sports, and I should have stayed in sport. I dropped out of anything that was body conscious, like swimming and gymnastics, that I was really into. And I ended up focusing on soccer, which ended up being okay. But when I was a little girl, I grew up in a place and a time where I wasn't allowed to play certain sports. Literally was not allowed. Not that I didn't want to. My older brother played baseball, and I wanted to play baseball desperately, and I wasn't allowed. So the brothers played and the sisters watched, and I just never forgot that. So I have this tiny littlest chip on my shoulder, I guess, as an adult, that I want to show little girls now that the opportunities are there. And I wanted to specifically show adult women doing these things so their daughters or their nieces or their neighbors or their students could look up to them and say, oh, she's still doing it, then I can do it too. And like both Anna and Emma said, like, it's not even that we all aspire to be the best in the world, or we don't aspire to be Olympians, but there's this missing piece to the puzzle these days where participation it's failing a little bit, in that we're taught to think we need to be the best and we need to be good at everything, and we don't. We need to be encouraged just to participate and fail and suck at stuff, and just to get, you know, your creative side of you moving, or your body moving, and that should be our goal. So yeah, I don't know if that actually answered your question, but that's where I'm at with that one.
It does, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all so much for sharing. I think, Lyndsay, I'll let you wrap it up. I'll pull the PowerPoint back up, and we've got, just conscious of time here. I promised everyone a 12:30 finish, so I will try and keep us on track.